How are you guys doing? Feeling in the weather? Not yet? All right, so let's get started. We have 50 minutes and then another 2 hours after that to continue. So we'll go on. Our topic is about gamifying Agile adoption. We were on, while we were sitting for lunch with someone, so they said, oh, this is like a little game to learn about Agile, and we were like, no. This is a real thing that we have teams using, and it's something that we are trying to do to address some of the challenges we face during our Agile adoption. And so this presentation is going to give you a quick preview into some of the things that we did. It's an actual game that we have built, and it's a game that people are playing on everyday basis. So what we want to do is, the way we have structured this talk is we want to quickly run through some of the typical challenges that teams face when they go through an Agile adoption, just so we all are on the same page. And then we talk about specifically what did we do about that and how our game is trying to address that challenge. All right? So, quick show of hands, how many people here have, in your companies, have gone through the Agile transformation? All right, that's good. And did you guys get what you expected? Kind of. Yeah.
But part of this sort of a vicious cycle. If people don't use the tool, you don't get the information you need, and then people get disgusted and they leave the tool, and it just gets worse and worse as time goes on. Unless managers provide you, or unless people see a immediate positive feedback,
so right on, right? That's one of the core things that we're trying to do with this game, is to encourage that kind of a continuous participation and feedback. So what are some of the typical challenges you guys ran into? Like, quickly, I just want to get a pulse of, what are the kind of challenges you've seen? Like, people said they kind of got some mixed things. As you're going through the transformation, or as you went through your transformation, do you want to talk about some quick challenges you saw? Yeah?
The biggest challenge we had was having the tool thrown down people's throats and saying, you're Agile now. Or they go to a 2-week, what do you call it?
Immersion or a training or whatever, yeah. How ironical, right?
Really having continuous feedback for a period of time. Everything that I've heard from Rally, the scenarios that we say we kind of hear and that I've seen that seem to work, are where people have continuous feedback for some period of time that says, well, you're not quite there, how do you write a story, why do you want to do tasks, things like that. And the end result is people write 3-word stories and then come back 30 seconds before the sprint's supposed to end and type badly and say, yeah, I did it.
Okay. So I think you have a lot of experience to share, so that's good. Anybody else wants to talk about any typical challenges they ran in? Yes, please.
We had issues of collaboration because the company was siloed, and there were shared services where people were working on operations and multiple things. So when they get into a collaboration or stand-ups, they think it's too much time spent on projects, and we just competing priorities.
So different teams working on different things, kind of trying to get them to work together as one project.
Dedicated team model works very okay, but especially shared services that teams who are extended, beyond the core software development is where the challenge.
Okay, cool. One other last thing before we kind of get in. Cross team.
To have enough solutions to marketing people buy into how we can do a product first, showing an ROI, and what goes first, making those our decisions, rather than just a team working on that.
Yeah, getting the marketing people, getting the feedback from the market, front end, back end. Cool. All right, so let's quickly run through some of the challenges that we were seeing at this company called Ideas, which is where we were working. So one of the initial challenges which you might relate to is, with Agile, what we want is more of a shared responsibility. We want a collective ownership. And typically the things that you would see, especially to begin with, is some people are really bought into it and some people are driving the change while some people want to take a back seat and just watch. So you don't really see that kind of a shared responsibility and accountability. We want better collaboration. But what we typically see is, people kind of working in silos and saying, oh, my job is done with this thing, now toss it over the wall, now not my problem, your problem, right? Instead of kind of having that shared ownership and collective responsibility. Even if we got in some of the initial tests and we got those automated tests working, how do we, keep that growing? How do we ensure that that safety net keeps continuing as we go building the product, right? That's another typical challenge you see. Initially, there's a lot of excitement. People do write a bunch of automated tests, and then it just plateaus out, right? So this was another typical challenge we saw. We want teams to be, integrating the software continuously, check in more frequently, work as close to the latest branch as possible, the head, instead of kind of going off in their own islands and working on little things. So this was another typical challenge we see. We want people to move away from the broken window syndrome, where if you see something broken, you don't want them to say, oh, not my problem, someone else's problem. And things keep just building on top of each other, right? Instead of when you find something, fix it then and there. And, just try and address things when you find it instead of leaving the broken windows. One classic thing that a lot of teams run into is that, at the end of each sprint, we want something that's demonstratable, something that's valuable, that can be shown. But how do you take this thing of big feature and break it down such that I can show something valuable without getting into, just focusing on, like, I'm a front-end developer, so this is all I'm going to worry about, and I'm going to just build that, instead of thinking of the entire cycle, right? So slicing stories vertically so that they can actually deliver value is another typical challenge we see teams run into. I think one of the big things about Agile was about increasing the visibility. Based on that, we could make more informed decisions along the way, and we can inspect and adapt. And that requires some kind of feedback coming in from the team at regular intervals so we know where we are heading, and then we can inspect and adapt based on that. And the typical challenge we run in is, for example, people don't update Rally. If Rally is the tool that you use, people don't update Rally with what their current status is, so we can't know if we are, how far we are in terms of our burn down or stuff like that. That's another challenge that we want to talk about. And the last thing is, again, to me, the big holy grail of Agile was better predictability. And better predictability comes by having more, when you're kind of doing your iterations or sprints and you're committing, whatever you're committing, the team is actually able to deliver those things. And if they're not, then they adjust and they only pick what they can so that you can start building that predictability model in the team. But if they're not adapting, if they're not committing to what they're delivering, then that becomes a big challenge because you don't know now what to expect next time, right? So I just quickly ran through. We don't want to spend too much time in this, but this is kind of the context of where we were, right? This is kind of where we were, and we started thinking about what we can do to address these problems and how we can tackle this. A quick commercial break, right, before we get into the meat of stuff. My name is Naresh Jain. I'm an Agile coach. I help a lot of companies implement Agile practices. I'm actually kind of post-Agile, mostly don't really do too much of Agile consulting anymore. But yeah, I started the Agile India movement back in 2004, been running the show in India for a lot of conferences and stuff like that. I also have 2 startups. One of them builds games for kids to learn mental arithmetics. So that's where the fascination for gamification comes in. So that's about me. Ashish.
Thank you, Naresh. I'm Ashish Parkhi. I've been working with Ideas, a SaaS company, for the last 14 years. At Ideas, I play multiple roles. I'm a developer, I'm a product owner, I'm a manager. Most importantly, I'm very passionate about solving our business problems. Now, while we were thinking over the challenges that we were facing with Agile Adoption, in one of our informal chats, Naresh asked me if I've seen this TED Talk, Gaming Can Make a Better World, by Jane McGonigal. And I had not seen that. And I said, looking at the title, how's that possible? So we have a small section of this talk for you. Could you please play the talk?
I'm I'm Jane McGonigal. I'm a game designer. I've been making games online now for 10 years, and my goal for the next decade is to try to make it as easy to save the world in real life as it is to save the world in online games. Now, I have a plan for this, and it entails convincing more people, including all of you, to spend more time playing bigger and better games. Right now, we spend 3 billion hours a week playing online games. Some of you might be thinking, that's a lot of time to spend playing games, maybe too much time, considering how many urgent problems we have to solve in the real world. But actually, according to my research at the Institute for the Future, it's actually the opposite is true. 3 billion hours a week is not nearly enough gameplay to solve the world's most urgent problems. In fact, I believe that if we want to survive the next century on this planet, we need to increase that total dramatically. I've calculated the total we need at 21 billion hours of gameplay every week. So that's probably a bit of a counterintuitive idea, so I'll say it again, let it sink in. If we want to solve problems like hunger, poverty, climate change, global conflict, obesity, I believe that we need to aspire to play games online for at least 21 billion hours a week by the end of the next decade. No, I'm serious. I am. Here's why. This picture pretty much sums up why I think games are so essential to the future survival of the human species. Truly. This is a portrait by a photographer named Phil Toledano. He wanted to capture the emotion of gaming, so he set up a camera in front of gamers while they were playing. And this is a classic gaming emotion. Now, if you're not a gamer, you might miss some of the nuance in this photo. You probably see the sense of urgency, a little bit of fear, but intense concentration, deep focus on tackling a really difficult problem. If you are a gamer, you will notice a few nuances here. The crinkle of the eyes up and around the mouth is a sign of optimism. And the eyebrows up is surprise. This is a gamer who's on the verge of something called an epic win. Now, oh, you've heard of that. Okay, good. So we have some gamers among us. So an epic win is an outcome that is so extraordinarily positive, you had no idea it was even possible until you achieved it. It was almost beyond the threshold of imagination. And when you get there, you are shocked to discover what you're truly capable of. That's an epic win. This is a gamer on the verge of an epic win. And this is the face that we need to see on millions of problem solvers all over the world as we try to tackle the obstacles of the next century. I've started to think about what these games are making us virtuosos at. Here are the 4 things I came up with. The first is urgent optimism. Okay, think of this as extreme self-motivation. Urgent optimism is the desire to act immediately to tackle an obstacle combined with the belief that we have a reasonable hope of success. Gamers always believe that an epic win is possible and that it's always worth trying, and trying now. Gamers don't sit around. Okay, gamers are virtuosos at weaving a tight social fabric. There's a lot of interesting research that shows that we like people better after we play a game with them, even if they've beaten us badly. And the reason is it takes a lot of trust to play a game with someone. We trust that they will spend their time with us, that they will play by the same rules, value the same goal, they'll stay with the game until it's over. And so playing a game together actually builds up bonds and trust and cooperation, and we actually build stronger social relationships as a result. Blissful productivity. I love it. You know, there's a reason why the average World of Warcraft gamer plays for 22 hours a week, kind of a half-time job. It's because we know when we're playing a game that we're actually happier working hard than we are relaxing or hanging out. We know that we are optimized as human beings to do hard and meaningful work. And gamers are willing to work hard all the time if they're given the right work. Finally, epic meaning. Gamers love to be attached to awe-inspiring missions, to human planetary scale stories. So just one bit of trivia that helps put that into perspective. So you all know Wikipedia, biggest wiki in the world. Second biggest wiki in the world, with nearly 80,000 articles, is the World of Warcraft wiki. 5 million people use it every month. They have compiled more information about World of Warcraft on the internet than any other topic covered on any other wiki in the world. They are building an epic story. They are building an epic knowledge resource about the World of Warcraft. Okay, so these are 4 superpowers that add up to one thing. Gamers are super empowered, hopeful individuals. These are people who believe that they are individually capable of changing the world?
Cool. I think I'll suggest that you go through this TED Talk. It's a very interesting TED Talk. And I like you. I was very fascinated after going through that TED Talk. And I started reading more about gamification, what gamification is. And the more I read about it, I started noticing gamification being implemented almost everywhere. So gamification is making use of game elements and the game design principles like the leaderboards, the badges, trophies, goals, and missions to drive a specific behavior, but in a non-gaming context, so outside gaming context.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at these companies, do you notice how they have used some of these game elements to actually influence your behavior? Anyone's on LinkedIn? Yeah, have you noticed some of the gaming elements that they have implemented to get you to do certain things that maybe otherwise you wouldn't do? They rate you as the more, they show you the completion, they do a bunch of interesting things that kind of nudges you to do things which otherwise you might have not done, right? That's kind of a really powerful use of gamification outside a game context, right? So does, if you're a frequent flyer, you try to travel only with one airline to crank up the miles, right? To get the million-mile status. I mean, these are all crazy things. You wouldn't do things otherwise, right? You would find the cheapest ticket or the most convenient ticket and fly, but now you'd only fly on a specific airline.
Fitbit is another example. Like if anyone of you is using Fitbit basically does a great job at gamification. What they're doing is generally hidden information, like the calories that we are burning or the amount of exercises that we are doing, how much we are sleeping. That information is not visible. Like these devices are surfacing that information, bringing in a lot of visibility around it. And with that visibility, they're hoping that users would make a conscious choice of what they're doing, what they're eating, what they're drinking. And they're trying to help their users to fulfill their goal of staying fit. Now, all these companies, in some or the other form, are making use of gamification techniques to drive certain user behavior. And that's where we started thinking, can we make use of gamification techniques to deal with the challenges that we were facing with Agile Adoption? Now, and on one of our Ship It days, we decided to give it a shot. Ship It Day is our 24-hour hackathon. It was inspired by Daniel Pink's famous TED Talk on motivation and also by Atlassian's Ship It Day. A bunch of us got together and we decided to pursue this idea, gamifying Agile Adoption. We came up with 5 objectives. We wanted to bring in more transparency and visibility into what the developers and everyone, the entire team is doing. We believe that visibility leads to a lot of accountability. We wanted to promote collaboration and teamwork, but at the same time, we also wanted to preserve individuality. Like in case of sports, for every player, the statistics are recorded. Those statistics help that player to improve on certain areas where he's weak. But the player doesn't win until the team wins. So we wanted to balance both those aspects. We wanted to promote the culture of appreciation. Like we wanted our team members to go and say a little, thank you, and recognize the contributions done by other team members. We wanted them to go beyond their routines. Like mission is one of those things in game that drives people to do things that they would not usually do. So we wanted to have missions in the game. And most importantly, we also wanted to automate as much as possible for easier adoption of the game itself. If it's manual, then the adoption becomes very low. Now with that, we thought that what we'll do is for any behavior that is in line with the values that we have defined, we'll start crediting positive stars or positive points. And if the behavior is not in line with the values that we have defined, we'll start deducting stars. So that's where we started with. And most prominently, like Rally and Jenkins, these are the 2 tools that we are primarily using. And both these tools has a lot of data around what the user is doing. So if the developers are committing their code, all that information would be available in Jenkins. The code quality information would be available in Jenkins. Anything to do with the delivery of the software, all that information is available in Rally. So we thought these would be our 2 primary targets. We'll write some plugins around it, and we'll start getting data from these applications, and we'll start surfacing this information on our gamification app. We call it Rockstar. Lucky for us, like Jenkins already has a continuous integration game plugin available. So we thought we'll extend that plugin. And for Rally, we decided to make use of the nice REST APIs that they are exposing to get the required information and to surface it on the UI. And with that, in the 24-hour cycle, we came up with our first gamification application. And this is the leaderboard of that application. We started showing the star of the day, star of the week, and star of the month. So, as you start doing good, you start accumulating stars, and you surface on at these levels. Now, this is where the visibility factor comes in. This becomes more visible as to what you're contributing. We also wanted to make those users visible or those players visible who are appreciating others. We wanted to appreciate them by having a leaderboard for them. Open missions, this is where all the team members would see what are the new missions available, which are beyond the routine work. So if they go and claim those missions, and if they fulfill those, they get additional stars for it. This was a leaderboard, the very first leaderboard, and this was a level. So like in game, progression always helps. Like it's always nice to see that we are moving from one level to another level. That gives a sense of achievement, kind of. So these were our levels, very basic levels. We decided to have the smallest object in our solar system to be the largest object in our solar system. And as you start gaining points or stars, you move from levels to level, and the goal is to reach the sun level. That's where you want to be. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, so what you see over there in the arrow is after we implemented, so this was a 24-hour hackathon, we implemented it, and then we said, let's pilot it with our own team. And so we put it in our team, and this is basically from Rally. You can see the velocity graph. What you notice over there is basically up till this point, we had a lot of ups and downs. And then here, what you see is that the velocity A is increased, which actually doesn't mean too much. Don't go too much by that. What's important here to notice is this portion that you see shows how many stories were accepted within the sprint. The product owner didn't have to wait till the end of the sprint to accept them. How many stories were accepted within the sprint? To actually see a little bit more detail, that's our burn down before the gamification. And what you will see is those blue lines, which look purple now, actually are the burn down of the stories, and the greens show basically when the stories were accepted. And if you notice here, after the gamification was implemented, a lot more stories right from the second day onwards started getting accepted, and it kept getting better and better. So this basically means that we were able to get more collaboration between the teams, the product owners, and get them to work more closely, get them to work on smaller stories so they can finish it quickly, deliver value, get it accepted. So some of the behaviors that we wanted in the team, we were able to surface that through this game. And basically this kind of shows the output of it, right? And don't go too much by it. It's just one way to visualize this. So the bottom line for us, which was very encouraging, is that right after this one little experiment, we could see that by putting this kind of a game in place, we could actually influence people's behavior, right? We could actually influence people's behavior. Some the way we wanted, and some not so much the way we wanted, right? So that's what is the interesting part. So if you see what we could get people to do is, update the statuses in Rally regularly, actually on everyday basis. If they didn't, they would get points debited from their account. So they would get points deducted. So that was good. We saw that there was more collaboration and interaction between the team members themselves and with the product owner. So they were getting stories accepted early. They were breaking down stories smaller, some good stuff like that. We had, as Ashish pointed out earlier, we had negative points. So if you did things that didn't align with the value system, then your points would get deducted, right? And because the points were getting deducted, the people started noticing it, and they became more and more risk averse. To give you an example, earlier they might take on 20 stories in a sprint. Now they feel if they don't complete the stories, then they will get dinged for it, right? So people started taking less work. So they started playing more safer, right? And that basically made it less risk averse. Like, there's a balance between the two. There's a certain amount of risk you want to take, right? But you don't want to go crazy all out. So, what we were seeing is that people were going too much to the other side, where they were becoming more risk averse. we were seeing that if you completed the stories early in the sprint and you got it accepted, then you would get bonus points. We wanted to encourage people to commit to finish off, to get the stories signed off early. But to do that, what people were trying to do is cut corners and somehow, basically get the product owners to accept the story. So that was something that we didn't quite expect people would do. And lastly, what we started seeing is that, the first week or so, the leaderboard was exciting. But after that, it was pretty much static. And so people stopped paying attention to the leaderboard. There was basically people were not even looking at who's the leader. I mean, they were just like ignoring it. So some of these things were kind of interesting. If we were to just summarize what we saw is, one is that we were able to influence people, but in the negative side, the negative points were actually bothering people, and they were doing things that we didn't quite want them to do. The second thing is that the leaderboard was pretty static, so they were not quite excited by the leaderboard. So in some sense, the gamification element of the leaderboard was not very successful. So do you want to talk about, Ashish, what do we try to do to address these challenges?
So we wanted to deal with these challenges, and one of our objectives was to bring in a lot of visibility, right? But the dashboard that we had, or the leaderboard that we had, was not giving us that visibility into more granular sense. So that's when we thought that we'll go and introduce badges, and badges for specific tasks. So let's say, for example, if you're committing code, then a specific badge for committing code. If you're writing test cases, then a specific badge for doing that. If you're delivering stories, then a specific badge for that. And that's where we came up with badge list. And since the negative points were bothering the team members, instead of giving negative points and deducting their score, we started giving them negative, or rather devil badges. So we created 2 badges. One are angel badges on top and devil badges on the bottom. So you want to have angel badges, you don't want to get devil badges at all. So devil badges, like anything you do wrong, the story is spilled over, you get a devil badge. You break a build, you get a devil badge. Angel badges, like you do open source contribution, you get an angel badge. You commit code frequently, you get an angel badge. And in the badges, we created levels within the badges, so that what the team members can do, depending upon their skill set area, they can compete at badge level. So we created 3 levels: bronze, silver, and gold. So as you start, let's say committing code, you start gaining points, and then on that one specific badge, you can compete with the rest of the team members. So that's what the badges did. This is how the new leaderboard looks like. Apart from the earlier board, now we have this badge board, and on that badge board, we see the individuals who are competing on those badges, and we are showing the top three individuals there. So now this became much more dynamic than the earlier static dashboard. Now, that was a leaderboard. Now this is my own board. Now one of the ideas of gamification is for the individuals to understand where they stand, what they are doing. So the leaderboard, my board would quickly give me the indication of the various badges that I have received and the level at which I am for that particular badge. It will also tell me which is my next badge. So it's kind of showing me a progression. How many points I have to collect to get to the next level of that specific badge. It tells me on a specific badge, it will tell me who my competitor is. So this is the guy ahead of me, and this is the guy just behind me. So that creates a sense of competition. So people would look at this and, depending upon their skill set, start competing at different level. But again, we wanted to make that competition healthy by having team points and not just individual points. So as an example of team points, let's say Delivery Champ. Delivery Champ is a badge that you would receive when a story is accepted in a given iteration. Now, all the individuals who are working on that story, it could be the product owners, the developers, the QA, everyone working on that story, they'll get this badge if the story is complete. And they'll get bonus points if the story is completed early in the cycle. So the goal there was to see if people are slicing the stories well and getting the stories accepted earlier in the cycle. If the team doesn't deliver the story, if the story gets spilled over into the next iteration, then they get a spillover champion badge. So again, the entire team who is working on that specific story, all those individuals will receive this badge. Now, as you can see, this information is getting surfaced from Rally. So we are using the Rally client to get this information on this particular application. Next example is a test champ. This is an individual level badge where as you start writing more test cases, you receive this specific badge. This information is coming from Jenkins.
So these are automated tests. So when you basically check in these tests and if they run successfully on Jenkins, then that's when you would get points credited to yourself.
Correct. Frequent code committer. We want people to commit their code frequently, and we don't want them to break builds by doing so. We want them to commit the code. We want them to run all the tests and have complete successful builds. So if there are successful builds after code commit, they get points under this badge. If they break a build, then they get a build breaker badge. We want them to go and update Rally on day-to-day basis. So if they don't go and update Rally for the to-dos and the actual work that they have done, then we give them a process violator badge. On the same lines, like let's say if you're doing that job, if they're going and doing and updating Rally, then we would give them a process badge, so which is a good badge. Now, using this screen, they can go and appreciate someone. They can go and say under what criteria they are trying to appreciate the other person. They can give the reasons for the appreciation. This is where you go and create new missions. The missions are visible on the leaderboard. People can go and grab the missions and work on it and collect more points when the missions are complete. We wanted to make the system as automated as possible, but there are still a lot of areas that we have not been able to automate. Like let's say people are going and writing blogs. We want to encourage them to do that. We want them to encourage to go and do open source contribution. So all those points they can go and claim by themselves. So if they do that, they can come here and they can claim it under a specific badge. This is how in our DevPit area we have put on a TV where we are showing the leaderboard where the information is surfaced and the information is made visible to all the users. So that kind of starts bringing in a lot of accountability. Like you don't want to be seen on the devil side of the badges. You want to be seen on the angel side of the badges, and you want to be leading on those badges. So that's how we are trying to make this more transparent and visible.
So I think that's a quick run through some of the things that we have done. It's basically 2 hackathons, so 48 hours worth of work that's gone into this. So let me pause and quickly ask you, right? So based on what you have seen so far, right? We did the version 1, right? We hit some roadblocks. We then introduced the concept of these badges, and we took away the negative points. And we tried to do some changes, and we said, okay, now hopefully we will get better behavior. What do you think the outcome after this would have been? Do you think we would have done better or worse? Better? So that's on the top. What you see is the velocity before any gamification. That's version 1 of gamification. This is all version 1. And this is version 2, which is where we introduce the badges and we remove negative points. And what we actually see is kind of some of that behavior kind of reflected over here. Kind of velocity all over the place, stories not getting accepted within the sprints, spillovers, and stuff like that. So we're still kind of figuring out why this behavior, what's happening. We're still trying to figure out like what is going on. Is negative points actually a good idea? Intuitively, we feel it's not a good idea. But then if you take out negative points, you kind of see a different behavior than what you would think logically. You had something, yeah?
I was just wondering how you're evaluating other team members, helping other team members out versus team members stars and
So there is a badge for team, there is a badge called as team member itself. So team, I forgot the name of the badge. It's team champion or something. So there, team members can go and rate someone else on how much they are contributing to the rest of the team members. So they can do that. The badges that we saw here, those are sample badges, but there is a list of bunch of badges where you can go and promote that team building activity.
There's actually a lot of badges. The other thing is that when a story is finished, right, everyone who's worked on that story will get points. It's not just one individual. Because we want that collective ownership. We want people to work together, right? And if it spills over, then everyone would get a negative point. If a bug is reported from production, it's not just the developer or tester who would get a negative point. It's actually the entire team that had worked on it would get a negative point.
So a lot of people who pursue metrics as a motivator for people discover that those metrics are often perverse. Right? They cause people to overemphasize the things that's measured and actually sacrifice things that are really important
agree with this last chart? Does it tell you that the quality of the stuff that people were doing in terms of Agile was declining over this period?
So that's a very good question, and we are also strong believers of not going down, not becoming metrics crazy, right? Because that can completely mislead you. To your question, I think there were quite a bit of correlationship between the effects that we were seeing. Now, the metrics is only a data point to visualize that. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it's a data point to visualize, saying, okay, we introduced this. This is what we are seeing. Maybe the metrics itself is wrong. Maybe there is a correlationship, right? But if we were to really gamify this, you need some measurable means which are meaningful, which are agreed. And that is something that I think we're still struggling. In general, I think the Agile community is still struggling big time in terms of what are the right metrics, what should we look at. Like I have a blog post, I think 2007, saying velocity and story points recipe for disaster, right? Don't look at it. It's a totally ridiculous number. Or code coverage. Don't get seduced by code coverage. Total ridiculous thing. But it all depends what point in time of your evolution or this transformation you are in, right? At some point, these things might make sense till you kind of grow out of it, right? So when you're kind of adopting, what you want is some kind of a rhythm, a velocity that you could actually sense, and if the teams are doing well or not, and then find ways to fine-tune it. So again, to your point, very valid. Is this a realistic thing of what we are seeing on ground? Partially, yes. I mean, we were seeing individuals, we were seeing things like individuals going and telling other people, like, you need to slow down, otherwise I'll look bad. Right? So we were seeing some of that stuff coming on. And it's some expected, some not so expected. I think someone else had a question.
It's extending to the previous point, right? You guys have been talking about it. I mean, there are two parts of this, right? I mean, if you think about it, sometimes there are external factors, retrospectives and estimations that are not working well. So it's beyond one story that what is getting impacted. So I don't know what kind of exception process you can have to score it in a certain way consistently, because
so again, we are not looking at one iteration alone, right? We are looking over a period of time to seeing the trend, right? Because you could have one-off iteration blow off, you could have one-off story blow off, right? Which is perfectly fine in my opinion. But it's over a period of time, it kind of looking at the trend. Are we getting better? Is it in line with what we want? Or are there more problems than before?
Yeah, do you tie this to the process areas? For example, estimation, corporate estimation. The core reasons why something could drop or something. That's the main, that correlation is usually.
So again, this is just an input, right? So the teams have to still sit together. They still have to figure out what the root cause is, where the problems are. They still have to do that. This is just trying to tell them something about what's going wrong, and it's trying to force them to do something. So the tool itself is not helping them to find the root cause, but the effect is, having them.
So the ideal place where we would want this game to be, right, is where the teams will decide the rules of the game, right, collectively. They would define that. That would be based on, let's say, the retrospective they did, right? And they would define the rules of the game. They would play the game, and they'd say how it panned out. This will give them more feedback, continuous feedback, rather than just at the end of the sprint, right? And they have this continuous feedback. They have stuff automated that's recording things, so it's not feelings anymore. It's actual data that you can operate on, right? So that's where we want to go. But have we figured out the right measurement tools, the right metrics? Probably not. I mean, not in 48 hours for sure.
Yeah.
So in any release, you may have 4 or 5 teams working on it. And all the things don't have the same kind of work. So the complexity differs. And if you give a badge to a person who committed a lot, then he could be doing a buckler, which could be a little place, and you'd be committing 10 in a day. And who are doing a feature with a big increment, you'd be doing a day or 2. How can you evaluate this? So for me, the number, he got 4 commits. He's the best. No, this is much more complex than this. He should be the one who's getting. So how?
So that's where I think the team should decide, right? What is the So for example, this guy for committing a quick bug fix could get 1 point, while the other guy when committing a serious feature could get 10 points for a commit. So you could vary, you could play around with the numbers itself, right? So there are things that could be done. We've not done any of that stuff. I mean, this is just I wouldn't even call this a proof of concept. It's a hackathon, right? But the idea is that this kind of helps us understand that there are ways you can actually build some of these things into a game, and that could incentivize people to behave in a certain way, right? Now, you could decide the weightages on each of those points. You could decide how you want to structure that. You could scale it up at an org level when there will be other kinds of complexities that will kick in. But right now, this thing is mostly piloted with one team.
And if you think about it, like, we are looking at, again, a span of time. So, like, that one individual might be fixing a bug in 1 day, but over a period of release, I think it gets averaged out over a period of time.
So we'll just pause because we have a few more things to finish off. Let's just run through that quickly, and then we'll be open for questions. I believe there's 30 minutes after this. There's nothing happening, so we'll be more than happy to do more questions. But I think we just have a couple of more slides. We'll quickly finish off those, and then we'll get. So quick announcement that we did open source this, and we are hoping that, as you know, there are a lot of unanswered questions. We don't have all the answers, and we're hoping we can build a community of gamers around this who can build this game into something more meaningful, something that is very flexible, something that is more, suitable for their teams. So it's open source. We want people to fork the repo, to send us pull requests and things like that. So we'll be happy to do that. What are the next steps for us, right? What are the next steps? What are we thinking right now? Right now, we only have 2 plugins, one with Rally and Jenkins. I think there is a lot of other plugins that can be built in for this game where we can pull data from Sonar or from Travis or other kinds of things that will give more meaningful information that can then refine the ratings and things like that. As in this discussion was very clear, that there are a lot more things that needs to be figured out in terms of how you're going to make this engaging and how you're going to keep the novelty factor. Because with any game, if you've played games, after a while, it becomes boring. You don't want to keep playing it, right? So how do you keep the novelty factor in the game? We want to make sure that we want to actually make a hosted solution. So, like a lot of open source projects could use this. This could be a way for them to collect points across their open source projects and kind of have more of a lifetime statuses on that. We want people to share stuff through social media, their scores, things like that, so hoping to get a little bit of a viral effect going there. So these are some of the things that we are thinking going forward that we would like to do. But there are 3 important questions in front of us after having done this hackathon. There are 3 important questions. How do we make this game more engaging? Right? Because this is going to die out if it's not going to be engaging. If the game is not going to be interesting after a month, then it's not going to be interesting at all, right, to even start playing this. So we need to figure out how to make this more engaging. We need to make the game more resilient because people will game the system, right? That's what we are born to. We are born to game systems, right? So how are we going to make the system more resilient to people gaming? And finally, how do we get more open source contributors who can, do other interesting things that we are not thinking about? So those are kind of where we want to go, and 3 open big questions for us. And with that, we will open the floor for questions.
Right there. Can you go back to the GitHub slide while you're taking questions so I can describe that real quick? Thank you.
Your missions, were those missions created from things from your backlog, or were they separate things? Separate. So did you see a change in behavior since they weren't in the backlog? As people, since you got extra points for those, were people driving to those?
So an example is that this project that Ashish was referring to was started in 2004, 2003.
Yeah.
Right? And so we were using AND for the build tool. And we wanted to explore other tools. And one way to make that is to basically make it as a tech debt item and put it in the backlog and then play it as a technical story. The other way we thought is we basically make it as a mission so people can go and explore stuff and then come and suggest what is the best tool. So we actually put it as a mission, and we saw people actually kind of taking that up. And then for us, because we have this 24-hour hackathon, people take some of these ideas and try it out in the hackathon. So that's where the missions is kind of heading towards. But I personally believe that if it is outside the backlog, it might be a little bit more interesting for people. Also, it is, I don't have to go through the whole backlog process. I could simply go and create a mission, which is a lot more lightweight, and that would encourage more people to get out these scratch my personal itch kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just curious how you achieve that balance. You want to make sure you get your backlog stuff done, but also the interesting thing of continuing to improve, right? And making it not necessarily something that's in the backlog, but
the moment you put it in backlog, there's a lot more ceremony that comes along with it, and you want to make that process lightweight so people think of a stupid idea and they can put it over there, and that's where I think innovation will happen. You have to go through, justify to 20 people why it needs to be there. I think that's a dead end.
So you talk a lot about sort of how to drive behavior and whatnot. What I haven't heard is sort of the perspective from the team itself. Some of this sounds a lot like, guinea pigging and, experimenting on the team. And I would expect this to be more of, the team itself should look at this as, something fun, something, that they can, feel rewarded from it. And I just wanted, I haven't heard yet sort of, what is the team saying about all this? How do they feel about, is there any negative sort of like, I don't want to be part of this, I just want to do my job and move points along and not participate in it?
That's a brilliant question.
Yeah. On the hackathon itself, a bunch of us from the team, we actually wrote this program. So the team, part of the team was involved in creating this tool itself. And in the beginning, when we talked about negative points, that's when a lot of people had those problems, why are you cutting my points for this activity and that activity? So at that time, they were very apprehensive. But after that, when we introduced badges, then that problem was not there. And since most of these activities are done automatically, no one has to really go and play it. It just happens in the background. What we have seen is that in the beginning, people would go and look at dashboards and leaderboards and talk about it a lot. Over a period of time, that novelty factor goes down. And then we have to now figure out a new way of, again, engaging. That's our biggest challenge, how to keep that engaging.
Is it leadership saying that, or is the team saying, hey, we've got to
for ideas, there's not much leadership.
Yeah,
so Ashish
small,
and the team, basically that's it, right? It's literally a startup, if you can think of. So there's not like management driving this, right? I think maybe where you're coming from is if, let's say, I'm a big company and I try to push it down on the teams, maybe it would be perceived very differently. What we've experimented so far is more of team kind of saying, okay, this is a cool idea, let's try and do this, as a way to visualize what we are doing, as long as I don't have to enter 20 different forms in 20 different places, because they hate going to Rally and update stuff. Right? But if this happens automatically for them, then it would be easy for them, right? That information is already getting collected. I check in stuff, I add a tag, and it just happens, right? Stuff like that. But there is still a lot more to it. There's a lot more dynamics. I believe with every game, you cannot satisfy everyone. There'll always be people who will complain about it. They're like, oh, why are you giving an evil badge for that? People will complain about stuff like that, even though they would have agreed and come up with the rules of it, right? So it's mixed.
Have you considered sort of the opt-in, like, hey, these people want to play, these people don't, or is it sort of like we're all going to do it together with it?
Yeah, we don't have those sections right now. So if you are a part of ideas, then you get to play that automatically because it's integrated with our core tools. Everyone has to play that.
What we have not done is taken this and made it part of your performance appraisal.
Yeah.
The moment we did that, then we're talking serious stuff. So if we did that, I think we would have a lot more issues. And there has been some talk about, can we use this data as a way for doing performance appraisals? And we are like, well, hang on, we didn't even build the game yet. So let's watch. There was a question back there.
Yeah, I actually have a twofold question to the whole gamification as a concept, right? I mean, have you guys ever felt where the team kind of felt like they were being manipulated by this? Basically, you do the right behavior, I give you a cookie, right? And then you reinforce that kind of behavior. Because that's what, like, when we are introducing concepts of gamification, they're kind of felt after a while, well, wait a minute, somebody's trying to manipulate my behavior. And second, my second question to that is, have you guys ever felt where just by introducing this kind of a gamification concept, collaboration actually declined because there's a self thing kind of kicked in where it's my team or team X versus team B where I want to score more points or I as an individual, the team wants to score more points. So I'm going to basically start playing the game in a way that it's basically advantageous for us or me compared to, like, say team X or the other individual in my team. So have you ever seen any kind of this behavior come out of gamifying?
So to your second question, right, are people trying to optimize or play the game in a way such that it's beneficial to them at the cost of other people, right? We've seen maybe one instance of it where someone went and told other people, you don't check in code so frequently because I'm looking bad. So that's kind of reverse of that. But I don't think so far we've really done it at the large scale to really see some of those problems. And I think that's a good problem to have when we get there, because if people are taking this seriously, then there's something, we are on to something.
Right, because, I mean, as we go towards the behavior or correct collaborative behavior change, this might actually, and in my personal experience, I've kind of seen like it would actually hamper, on the contrary, gamification hamper that, where it kind of became too competitive against one another. So
we've not got to that stage so far. We've seen actually better collaboration. We've seen people actually working much more better. And if we get to that point, I think we'll have to rethink, or maybe the game is not. They don't need to play the game anymore at that point. It might be a good way to transition people into the Agile, is what we are thinking.
And that's why I think when you put up the 3 challenges over there, the first thing was, well, I mean, how do we get it, continue using it? Maybe the life cycle of the game is you bring it to the X point and that's where it fades off. It has done its job, the mission is completed, you guys carry on.
Yeah, that could be it. Or we find different ways of playing the game that solves that problem. I mean, this can go into a life of its own. All right, cool. Thank you very much. We are done with the time.
And feedback in the app, please.